In a small town in America, Emily lived a daily routine that felt as predictable as the sunrise. Each morning, she woke up in her tiny apartment, the sunlight streaming through the thin curtains, casting soft shadows on the walls. She often rolled out of bed with a heavy heart, feeling an ache that tugged at her like an old friend she wished to forget. Emily would brush her hair and splash water on her face, trying to shake free the memories that clouded her mind. That quick act of self-care felt like a futile attempt to wash away the emotional scars she carried like invisible luggage. Her childhood was far from idyllic. Emily often felt invisible, as if she were walking through life in a fog where no one saw her pain. Her parents fought constantly, their loud arguments echoing throughout their small house. Each harsh word cut deep into Emily, reshaping her view of love and trust. Often, she would sit quietly in her room, wishing to disappear, hoping that maybe if she became invisible, the fighting would stop. These experiences left Emily with a lingering shadow of sorrow that stained her self-worth and sprinkled all her relationships with doubt. As she grew older, Emily learned to wear a mask. She smiled brightly at work, making small talk with coworkers over coffee, but inside, she felt a flame of resentment flicker. They saw her as happy-go-lucky Emily, always ready to lend a helping hand. Little did they know that behind that cheerful facade lay unresolved trauma. Emily avoided deep conversations. When someone asked about her family, her smile would falter, and she would quickly change the subject, clinging to the safety of surface-level interactions above the depth of truth. Emily also struggled with intimate relationships. Though she craved closeness, her fear of vulnerability kept her at arm's length. Every time she opened her heart, it felt like inviting danger inside, a tendril of fear slinking through her thoughts. It was as if a wall surrounded her heart, built brick by brick through years of hurt. The few romantic relationships she attempted turned sour quickly. With each heartbreak, she convinced herself it was her fault, reinforcing the belief that joy was something she would never possess. Yet, her empathy for others always shone through. Emily had a gift for listening, offering warmth like a blanket on a cold night. Friends often came to her for advice, unknowingly healing the wounds she kept hidden. Their stories of joy or grief moved her deeply but also reminded her of her own struggles. Encouraging others brought her a sense of purpose, and for a moment she almost forgot the bitter taste of resentment that lingered in her heart. Though Emily was physically present with friends and acquaintances, emotionally, she felt adrift. At times, she would look around and notice how easily others connected over shared experiences. The laughter echoed around her like music, but it only deepened her loneliness. The weight of her past pressed heavily on her shoulders, making simple social interactions feel like exhausting feats. She longed to share her truth but seemed unable to break free from the chains of shame and fear. As days turned to weeks, Emily heard the soft whispers of a hopeful possibility, like hints of spring thawing the winter ice. If she dared to face her demons, perhaps the healing process would begin. She wished to move away from the burden of resentment, to give herself the chance to embrace peace. Emily understood that this journey would take vulnerability, a quality she had learned to tuck away long ago. Still, a quiet voice deep inside urged her to lean into the discomfort, to unveil her truth piece by piece. The inner battle raged on, a tug-of-war between her fear of past pain and the desire for a better future. Emily could sense the shift brewing within her. In the solitude of her apartment, while organizing her belongings, a box filled with old letters caught her eye. The dust on the lid seemed to echo years of silence. What if she opened that box? What memories would resurface? The thought sent shivers down her spine, yet also sparked a flicker of determination. If healing could rise from the ashes of her painful past, perhaps she could finally exhale the bitterness she had held tight for so long. The love she always sought, first from herself and then from others, could be born anew. Through each small moment of reflection, Emily would realize her strength, the strength to choose peace over resentment. It was time to begin this journey toward liberation, even if it felt scary and uncertain. This time, she was ready to find the courage to reclaim her life. Emily felt the weight of her inner struggle pressing down on her like a thick blanket. Sitting at her kitchen table one afternoon, she stared blankly at her cup of coffee. A swirl of thoughts raced through her mind, each one louder than the last, clamoring for her attention. Something was definitely not right, but admitting it felt like tossing a stone into a deep well, one small splash, then silence. The need to heal battled fiercely against the fear of confronting the past. She felt like a warrior in a never-ending battle against herself. Words from her childhood echoed in her head, a strong reminder of the pain she had tried to bury. "You're not good enough," she recalled one harsh afternoon spent in silence. While those words came from her parents in cruel moments of anger, they now lived in her heart, preventing her from seeking help. Emily felt trapped in a cycle of fear and self-doubt. She wanted to be happy, yet the thought of therapy made her stomach twist into knots. This tiny idea of visiting a therapist sent her into a spiral of excuses. One sunny morning, while scrolling through her phone, she came across a post about mental health awareness. Instantly, the familiar urge to flee washed over her. "I don't need therapy. I can handle this," she thought, negating the truths that felt necessary to face. The picture of a smiling individual sitting with a therapist unnerved her. Instead of nodding in agreement about the merits of seeking help, she mocked the image. "People go to therapy when they're really broken," she whispered, convincing herself that she wasn't that bad. At work, things felt similar. When colleagues invited her to share a little bit about their lives, Emily would skillfully dodge the topic of her own struggles. She had perfected the art of diversion, turning the conversation back on them. When her friend Sarah mentioned dealing with her anxiety, instead of opening up about her own challenges, Emily plastered on her charming smile and offered advice. "You just need to think positive thoughts," she would say, her heart aching as the words escaped her lips. This self-sabotage only deepened the gap she wished to bridge. It was as if she were building walls high enough to hide behind while craving the sunlight that true companionship could offer. Sometimes, Emily also filled her schedule to the brim, thriving in chaos so that she wouldn't have to think about her past. If she kept busy, maybe she could pretend she was fine. The phone would ring, full of friends asking if she wanted to join a gathering, and she would leap at the chance, diving headfirst into each social event. It felt easier to drown herself in laughter than to face her demons. Yet, when everyone laughed around her, a part of her craved the honest connection she could never reach. The noise swirled in her mind, a jumble of happiness where sadness lurked, always waiting just beneath the surface. Deep down, she recognized her self-sabotage, yet each acknowledgement only created more guilt and shame. "I don't deserve to take up space talking about my feelings," she thought. This belief kept her spinning in self-doubt. Emily often told herself that everyone else had their lives figured out, while she was still lost in the dark. When moments of introspection arose, she would quickly push them away, tossing aside questions that demanded honest answers. Each day without attending to her emotional needs felt like another lost opportunity. Emily continued to search for small wins, believing that maybe if she completed enough tasks flawlessly, the internal commotion might quiet down. She desperately wanted to choose healing as a path but remained mired in a battle with herself. Though she felt a pull towards support and understanding, fear was a powerful adversary, gripped tightly around her heart, whispering false reassurances that reassured her remaining in silence was simpler. She hoped that maybe, just maybe, the healing would spread organically with time. But deep down, she began to realize that change needed more than time, it needed bravery. It needed her to confront what had haunted her for so long. Would she choose to open the box she feared, or would she remain trapped in her safe facade? One evening, as the sun dipped lower in the sky, Emily found herself sitting alone on her balcony. She wanted to feel the warmth on her skin, but the sudden chill of vulnerability started creeping in, whispering truths she had managed to ignore for too long. While watching the golden light fade into shadows, an old memory came rushing back, her birthday party from years ago. There were friends around, laughter filling the air, but she had felt out of place, with tears threatening to spill. "What's wrong with you?" a voice inside her haunted. Just then, her friend Sarah called. They used to share a close bond, spending countless hours talking about their dreams and fears. As Emily picked up the phone, she struggled to maintain her usual cheerful demeanor. Sarah sensed something was off right away. "Emily, you sound different. Are you okay?" The tone of concern in Sarah's voice melted away some of Emily's defenses, allowing feelings long buried to surface. "I'm fine, really," Emily replied, but the unsteady note in her voice gave her away. "Just tired, I guess." There was a heavy silence on the line, and Emily felt pressure build. She knew her friend was waiting for more. Finally, feeling an unexpected swell of emotions, she whispered, "I don't think I've felt fine in a long time." That statement hung in the air, holding power. "It's okay to not be okay," Sarah gently encouraged. "Have you thought about talking to someone about your feelings?" Those simple words sparkled a light in Emily, illuminating the possibilities that lay ahead. It was like opening a window, allowing fresh air into a space that had grown stuffy over the years. After disconnecting the call, a rush of thoughts clashed in her mind. The phrase, "talking to someone," echoed within her. She had always pushed the idea away, thinking it was not for her, but now she felt different. There was a flicker of curiosity mixed with fear, like a small flame shining through the shadows. What if her feelings mattered? What if sharing her pain could lighten the load? As days turned into nights, Emily considered the heedful words of her friend. The longer she procrastinated, the more uncomfortable her hidden emotions became. Whenever she sat mindlessly scrolling through social media or flipping through channels on TV, a nagging thought surfaced. "What are you waiting for?" It soon became unbearable, a persistent echo demanding her attention. In those moments, vulnerability transformed from a fear into an invitation. The following week, Emily took her first step. With shaky hands, she opened her laptop. The harsh light flickered as she navigated to a website for local therapists. Reading their profiles felt like stepping into a new world, with gentle words and encouraging slogans surrounding her. Emily felt a rush of determination, then an immense wave of self-doubt washed over her. "What if they can't help me? What if I can't say anything?" Emily discovered that simply initiating this search began to sparkle a sense of hope within her. The idea that she could address her past brought forth a longing for healing, pulling her more than it frightened her. That evening, she wrote down her feelings in a simple journal she had kept hidden in a drawer. "I am scared. I am tired of hiding," she scribbled, letting her feelings spill onto the page without judgment. With every word, she felt lighter. Instead of just fabricating excuses, thoughts transformed into a narrative that needed to be honored. Each phrase glimmered with honesty, helping to confront emotions she was afraid to face. Although there were still moments of doubt, they didn't feel as suffocating. Her small steps felt significant, and began to ease the pain she had carried for so long. In time, those realizations nurtured a growing sense of confidence. The discomfort of acknowledging her scars evolved into a quiet strength, encouraging her to look toward growth. Emily understood that healing wasn't an immediate fix but rather a journey, and she found comfort in knowing she had finally taken her first steps on that road. Each moment of reflection became a precious act of courage, affirming that she was deserving of healing and peace. Emily sat in the waiting room of her therapist's office, a knot tightening in her stomach. As she waited, snippets of self-doubt twisted in her mind. What if I can't find the words? What if I regret being here? But beneath the surface, a flicker of excitement danced within her. This was the moment she had been building toward, where confrontation met the hope of healing. When her therapist, Mrs. Williams, called her into the office, Emily took a deep breath and followed. The room was filled with soft colors and comfortable furniture, a contrast to the storm brewing inside her. As she settled into the chair, Emily glanced around, her fingers nervously tapping against her knee. "There's no turning back now," she whispered to herself, feeling the weight of her journey looming. Mrs. Williams offered her a warm smile and invited Emily to share her story. "Anything on your mind today?" she asked gently. At that moment, Emily's heart raced, her palms were sweaty, and suddenly the thought of digging into her past felt overwhelming. "I don't know where to start," she stammered, feeling vulnerable and exposed. Memories of childhood pain loomed large like shadows, ready to engulf her. "Take your time," her therapist replied with a calming tone. Encouraged, Emily began to speak. The words spilled out in a shaky stream, choked by years of silence. With each sentence, the weight of her past pressed against her chest iron-like. I remember the arguments, my mother's voice shouting, my father's anger. As she spoke, a rush of emotions poured forth, lifelike and fierce. Tears spilled from her eyes, a torrent of feelings she had kept restrained for far too long. Shock, sadness, and guilt engulfed Emily as she felt the memories come alive, as if they were demanding to be seen and acknowledged. For many years, when life got rough, she had learned to bury her feelings under layers of belief. Ignore it, move on, she had written on metaphorical sticky notes pinned to her heart. And now, she felt the walls she had built around her emotions crack. Each flourish of honesty felt like tearing down a bit of that wall, but fear clouded her mind. What would happen if she allowed herself to feel fully those emotions she had fought for years to suppress? Mrs. Williams noticed Emily's struggle. It's okay to feel pain, she reminded softly. You don't have to handle it all at once. You're safe here. Those words wrapped around Emily like a gentle embrace, reassuring her that she didn't have to face every wound in a single breath. Still, letting go of her defenses felt significant. She fought the urge to retreat to her familiar safe zone, where avoiding pain had become the norm. Releasing her long-held coping mechanisms felt like standing on a precipice, teetering on the edge. There were habits Emily often clung to, thoughts running in cycles like old tapes on repeat. For too long, she had hidden behind sarcasm and humor, masking her pain and deflecting questions. She felt ashamed that she had laughed while crumbling inside. Now, those habits chipped away at her ability to genuinely connect. Despite the discomfort, there was a growing sense of clarity within all the confusion. Each emotion that rose seemed lighter than the last as Emily began to recognize the complicated mix of strength and vulnerability in revealing herself. This was where their connection to healing began, the space between feelings expressed and unexpressed. For the first time, Emily saw potential in facing the darkest parts of her past rather than fearing them. Thought followed thought, creating a path where self-reflection paved the way. It wasn't easy, but her willingness to acknowledge her wounds laid the bricks of change, forming a foundation for her new journey. This session became a pivotal moment in Emily's life. It marked the beginning of reshaping her narrative, a series of choices toward embracing emotions as natural rather than burdensome. Though questions lingered about what would come next, she could sense something brewing inside, a fierce determination growing toward change. In acknowledging her pain, Emily felt the potential for freedom blooming in the space between grief and healing. As Emily sat in the cozy chair of Mrs. Williams's office, she felt the atmosphere shift inside her. The walls she had built to shield herself from pain were crumbling, piece by piece, and though she was frightened, there was also a flicker of hope stirring within. Today, she would venture into the dark corners of her heart where negative beliefs took root, long since drawing nourishment from her past experiences. Let's talk about some of the thoughts you've carried with you, Mrs. Williams suggested, her voice steady and supportive. Emily nodded, feeling the urge to shrink away from the conversation. Thoughts about unworthiness flashed in her mind, poetic yet painful. I am unworthy of love. It played over and over in her mind, a past friend who had taken center stage in her heart, reinforcing the notion that love was something meant for others, not for someone like her. Where does that thought come from? The therapist gently inquired, encouraging her to open the door of reflection. Emily winced, feeling warmth flush through her cheeks. Memories raced back, piercing at her mind and heart like tiny daggers. Past relationships and friendships pranced before her, each experience dragging her down further into the dungeon of self-doubt. Every time someone left, or I felt abandoned, it just screamed, "See? You're not worth it," she confessed, her voice shaky. She could hear echoes of her parents' arguments, harsh words that circled like vultures, whispering doubts that further cemented the truth of her unworthiness in her conscience. Each ending, whether romantic or friendly, had served to reinforce her inner narrative. She wasn't good enough, she didn't deserve to be held close. Love was for others. That sounds very painful, Mrs. Williams acknowledged, validating the hurt that nested deep within Emily. Facing those old emotional wounds felt like opening a floodgate with untold stories clawing to breathe. But remember, Mrs. Williams continued softly, thoughts are only beliefs until we challenge them. What if we tried to turn those thoughts around? The idea of challenging her deeply ingrained beliefs flooded Emily with apprehension. Even though she was starting to unveil her suffering, this next step felt monumental, as if she was standing at the precipice of a canyon, glancing at the great void waiting below. But what if I can't? What if I fail? The resistance pulsed inside her like a storm, preventing her from taking a leap of faith. In the quiet stillness of the session, tears spilled freely down Emily's cheeks. The overwhelming thoughts rattled against the bars she had set in her mind. The beliefs surrounding her unworthiness had wrapped around her tightly, hinting at a false sense of security. But recognition blossomed alongside fear, the knowledge that she could begin to rewrite her story, piece by piece. Mrs. Williams guided Emily through each step slowly, inviting her to pick apart those old thoughts like carefully unrolling a tangled ball of yarn. How would your life be different if you believed you were worthy of love? The question hung in the air like a spark flipping a switch inside Emily. Could she envision believing that love was truly hers to embrace? The fear of insignificance began to loosen its grip just enough to allow a new thought to rise. As conversations unfolded, Emily began to challenge the belief that she would never be enough. What evidence supports this? She pondered aloud. Memories of compassion from friends she had often dismissed rippled through her mind like a gentle stream. Their laughter, their connection, the moments of genuine support contradicted the notion of her worthlessness. Lines from her journal, filled with hopes whispered back at her, became part of the growing shift. For every painful memory she brought forth, curiosity sparked insights that allowed space for healing. The insight unfolded gently, tender yet powerful. She realized she had always been enough. Her experiences would no longer dictate her worth, they simply added layers to her journey. Though she still felt afraid, Emily understood that moving through fear was part of defining herself anew, transforming her pain into resilience. In those moments of clarity, she began to see love in a new light, not as something reserved for others, but a seasoning that belonged to her as well. Confronting her past became less daunting as her heart grew lighter with understanding. The person she had hidden for so long was waiting to bloom, no longer confined to the shadows. Slowly, she understood that healing required patience. It was the act of planting seeds, allowing trust and love to take root. She could gradually nurture herself to fully blossom. One afternoon, as the sun began its descent, bathing the world in a soft, golden hue, Emily found herself tangled in an emotional storm. She was at home, sitting cross-legged on her living room floor, surrounded by scattered photographs, pictures that told stories of happy moments and painful memories alike. This spontaneous idea to sort through the photos had felt like a healthy step, but now, she sat there frozen, tears streaming down her face as memories flooded in like a wave crashing against the shore. In her hands, she held a picture of her younger self, standing in a bright pink dress with a smile that sparkled like sunshine. The innocence reflected in her eyes was a stark contrast to the heaviness resting in her heart now. The memory of her parents' constant arguments echoed sharply in her mind, pulling tighter on her chest as though they were gripping her spirit, refusing to let go. "You're not worthy of joy." The voice of her past pierced through the unease, as if aligning with the image, mocking the very smile she once wore. As she continued sifting through the photos, deeper, darker memories surfaced. A haunting recollection of a close friend who had turned their back on her in a moment of need emerged, reinforcing the belief that trust and love were fragile concepts designed for others, not for her. The feelings toppled like dominoes, one knocking over another, creating chaos inside her. In that moment, overwhelmed by the sheer weight of the memories, a feeling of catharsis took hold of her. All at once, the pain of the past devolved into an unbearable sense of urgency. She had to confront these feelings or risk being carried away by them forever. Discomfort turned into a fierce realization. She was tired, utterly and completely exhausted from carrying the burden of unworthiness alone. The tears spilled freely, creating tracks on her cheeks as she whispered to the empty room. "I can't do this anymore." Emily felt vulnerable, caught in the conflict of her past and the possibility of claiming her future. This outpouring of grief was like an awakening. It felt as if the chains that had held her in darkness were beginning to crack. Sweat mingled with tears as vulnerability flooded her. For the first time, she recognized that every image, every memory had shaped her, but they didn't have to define her anymore. In the depths of that heart-wrenching moment, strength surged from within. She looked around at the scattered photos and felt a shift. They were a reflection of her past but not her present or future. This flicker of empowerment ignited within her a fierce determination to reclaim her life, thoughts, and emotions. No longer would she allow her history to dictate her worth. In truth, the journey she had traveled was one of resilience, a journey she chose to embrace rather than hide from. With clarity slowly forming in her mind, Emily stood up, wiping her tear-stained cheeks with trembling hands. Picking up the box of memories, she moved towards her bedroom, feeling the weight lift with each step. She began placing each photo inside gently, a ritual of closure unfolding before her. As she sealed the lid, what started as an exercise in reflection transformed into an act of liberation. In that moment, she decided to define herself differently. With newfound resolve, Emily would embrace who she was beyond her past. No longer defined by moments of loss or failure, she felt she was stepping into a space where possibility existed. She identified the truth: she was capable of love, healing, and connection. And although the path ahead was uncertain, the emotional breakthrough she had just experienced served as the turning point in her journey. Emily knew that healing wouldn't happen overnight, but she also understood that life was fluid. Moments would come and go, and each new day took on meaning when approached with transparency and courage. This significant emotional transformation infused her with empowerment, pushing her forward on the road of self-discovery. She looked outside at the sunset sky, painting the horizon in beautiful colors, a reminder of transformations born from darkness. In that colorful landscape, Emily felt the beginnings of hope unfurl in front of her, igniting her belief that a future filled with love and acceptance awaited her. Now she understood that stepping into her story meant living boldly in the present, open to healing, growth, and even joy. In the weeks following that pivotal moment, Emily felt a cautious lightness beginning to settle over her life. Each morning brought new opportunities for change. She awoke ready to face the day, the burden that used to weigh heavily on her spirit gradually lifting, like fog retreating in the warmth of sunlight. It was time to weave healing into her daily routine, creating moments for self-care that honored her journey. One of the first changes she made was to establish a morning ritual. Instead of rushing through breakfast or scrolling through her phone, she savored moments of stillness. She started with deep breathing. Each inhalation filled her with calmness, while each exhalation released the remnants of fear and doubt. Slowly, she found that spending just a few minutes connecting with her breath allowed her to set a positive tone for the rest of her day. After breathing, Emily embraced the idea of journaling more fully. This practice became a safe haven for her thoughts. Each entry started as a reflection. She would write down the moments she felt grateful, even for the small things. Some days, it was as simple as appreciating a warm cup of tea or the song of morning birds outside her window. As she poured her feelings onto the page, Emily allowed freedom to flow alongside her pen, releasing toxic thoughts she'd clung to for so long. "Today, I forgive myself," she wrote one morning, courage slowly creeping into her heart. Throughout therapy sessions, Mrs. Williams encouraged Emily to practice self-compassion. It was challenging at first. She was used to being her own harshest critic. But in those quiet moments of reflection, she started acknowledging her own pain with kindness. Whenever she felt the old beliefs creep in, thoughts of unworthiness or guilt, Emily reminded herself, "I am learning, and it is okay to not have it all together." Using kind words, much like she would for a dear friend, became a thread woven into the fabric of her everyday thoughts. Alongside the journaling and self-compassion, Emily began incorporating physical movement into her routine. She discovered that a simple daily walk could be both therapeutic and invigorating. While walking through the park, Emily noticed the beauty around her, the leaves rustling softly, children laughing, the fragrant blooms of spring surrounding her. With each step, she felt lighter. It was as if the negative weight she once carried started to dissipate with every stride she took. Instead of punishing her body with criticism, she chose to listen and honor it. Joining a yoga class filled her with a sense of community as well. Fellow practitioners surrounding her shared similar journeys. She felt safe expressing herself in this space, stretching her body alongside others working through their own struggles. With each downward dog and sun salutation, Emily learned to breathe into her discomfort, pushing gently against the boundaries of her fears. As the days turned into weeks, Emily began noticing significant shifts in her mental state. The constant worries that used to haunt her started to become quieter. Where guilt once loomed, she now felt an emerging sense of forgiveness. She began to realize mistakes made in the past were not definitions of who she was. They were merely parts of her story, teaching her valuable lessons along the way. The small, life-affirming changes reverberated through other areas of her life as well. Emily felt empowered in her relationships. She learned to express boundaries gently when needed. Her conversations with friends transformed into deeper connections, free from the old stories that had locked her into silence. She found joy in reaching out, in sharing laughter, and even in vulnerability. This process was not without its bumps. Sometimes, moments of sadness flickered back, memories of the past whispering in her ear. But sensing these moments grew easier, and instead of falling into despair, she practiced accepting her feelings as part of the ebb and flow of healing. "I can still feel sad and be strong," she thought, feeling comforted by the balance she was beginning to understand. As she continued to embrace self-compassion and healthy coping strategies, Emily felt a growing resilience building within her. No longer defined by unresolved emotions, she unveiled the strength intertwined with her journey. It became clear that she was not the girl who felt worthy of little. Emily was growing, adjusting her perspective to an empowered one, a shift glowing as brightly as the new spring flowers blossoming around her. As Emily settled into her new routines of self-care and mindfulness, a quieter, more hopeful shift took root inside her. With every small victory, she grew more determined to extend that sense of healing into her relationships. It was time to cultivate new connections, both romantic and platonic, that honored her journey and embraced her evolving sense of self. She began by reaching out to her friends, choosing to deepen the conversations they often shared. One weekend afternoon, she invited her close friends, Sarah and Mia, over for tea. Nervous yet excited, Emily took a moment to breathe before they arrived. This time, instead of deflecting personal discussions, she decided it was important to share her experiences. As they sat sipping herbal tea, Emily opened up about how she had been feeling, placing her trust in their friendship. "I really want to be honest about what I'm going through," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "I'm learning about myself, and I think it's time to connect on a deeper level." Sarah and Mia exchanged glances, and encouraging smiles filled the room. They both leaned in, eagerly interested, ready to engage authentically. Emily felt a weight lifting. She had taken the first step towards vulnerability. As the conversation flowed, she shared struggles and told her friends how she was learning to practice self-compassion. To her surprise, Sarah revealed her own recent challenges with self-worth, echoing Emily's journey. The realization that others faced similar battles transformed the atmosphere in the room. Instead of fear, there was camaraderie. They laughed, cried, and cheered each other on, shedding light on the connection where joy, pain, and honesty could coexist. Feeling the supportive waves around her, Emily also started to embrace the idea of setting boundaries. In previous friendships, she often did what others expected to avoid conflict. But now, she understood that boundaries were about preserving her well-being. When her friend Mark invited her out to an event that felt stressful, she politely declined instead of forcing herself to attend. Emily learned it was okay to say no, and put her needs first without guilt. While this new practice felt unfamiliar, it slowly became easier. Not only did it make her feel empowered, but it also enriched her relationships. When Mark tried to convince her, he noticed her firmness yet appreciated her honesty. "I respect you more for that, Emily," he told her after understanding her reason for saying no. His response solidified her belief that healthy relationships are built on honesty and respect. When it came to dating, Emily found the courage to approach connections differently. Instead of anxiously imagining rejection, she steadied her heart with the thought that vulnerability could lead to something beautiful. One afternoon, she met a charming artist named Chris at a local gallery event. As they chatted amidst the artwork, Emily felt the need for walls start to melt away. She shared experiences about her journey, and to her delight, Chris responded with warmth and empathy. He opened up too, sharing stories of his past and how art served as an emotional outlet. They connected over their experiences, appreciating the layers that shaped their personalities. This exchange felt richer than any other interaction she had experienced before. Recognizing they were both imperfect beings navigating life's complexities helped forge an instant bond. Encouraged by their connection, Emily allowed herself to embrace the sensations of possibility rather than fear. Rather than focusing on future outcomes, she focused on the moments they spent laughing, crafting memories as they moved through the gallery. Chris's acceptance brought her comfort, highlighting how healthy relationships could bloom from mutual honesty and respect. As Emily shifted how she navigated relationships, a ripple effect of positivity acted within her social circle. Friends complimented her newfound confidence, noticing an aura of strength surrounding her. "You seem so much happier lately," Mia emphasized one morning, her eyes sparkling with joy. "It's inspiring to see how you light up when you talk about your journey." These kind words were like seeds watering her growth, pushing her further into newfound resilience. As summer settled in, Emily became more comfortable expressing her needs and emotions without fear. Each interaction upheld her commitment to self-love and self-discovery, serving as a testament to her growth. The harmony of her inner transformation began reflecting outward, inviting understanding and compassion wherever she stepped. She was not merely a survivor anymore, she embraced the fullness of her journey, teaching herself and those she loved that relationships, built on trust and authenticity, can flourish, rooted in the powerful soil of healing and acceptance. As Emily stood by her apartment window, watching the vibrant sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, she marveled at how far she had come along her healing journey. The vibrant landscape felt like a reflection of her own transformation. In the past, moments like these would have passed her by unnoticed, overshadowed by feelings of worthlessness. Now, however, each sunset signified a new beginning, a gentle reminder of her resilience and strength. Her perception of the past had shifted dramatically. Once filled with shame and hurt, her memories were now framed with understanding. She no longer viewed her childhood or past relationships solely through the lens of pain. She could also see them as crucial lessons shaping who she had become. The experiences that once haunted her became entries in a personal growth journal, teaching self-awareness and lending her tools to face new challenges. Rather than allowing guilt to bind her, she began to see herself as an evolving being, a participant in her own healing story. With each therapy session, she had unearthed the power of self-acceptance. Now, when she looked in the mirror, Emily recognized a woman filled with potential instead of a young girl plagued by doubt. While occasional feelings of insecurity still surfaced, she greeted them with newfound compassion and patience. "It's okay to feel this way," she reminded herself. "It's part of being human." This mindset shift allowed her to treat herself tenderly, giving her space to navigate the waves of emotion with grace. Setting boundaries and fostering healthy connections flourished into a new purpose for Emily. She envisioned a future filled with nurturing relationships and supportive communities, a circle where vulnerability was welcomed and treasured. Her friendship with Sarah and Mia grew stronger, as they shared both light-hearted laughter and deeper discussions about their struggles. She also continued to nurture her connection with Chris, feeling an authentic bond. They shared moments infused with art and shared outlooks on resilience, developing a relationship grounded on trust and mutual understanding. Feeling the pull of purpose deep within, Emily decided to give back to others in ways that resonated with her new perspective. She signed up as a volunteer at a local support center where she could assist those navigating their own difficult journeys. With her experiences shaping her belief in empathy and compassion, Emily felt compelled to share her story, witnessing hope rekindle in others who seemed lost. The joy of contributing to their journeys sent ripples of fulfillment through her own heart. Each act of kindness reaffirmed that healing was a shared experience, a journey that could inspire change both personally and collectively. As autumn approached, Emily cultivated optimism for her future. She eagerly anticipated taking art classes, hoping to explore creativity that had always been a distant dream. Art had been a part of her life since childhood, a source of expression that lent color to darker days. Now, she was ready to dive into that channel again, intending to capture her unique journey on canvas. In her professional life, too, she embraced new opportunities. With confidence from her healing journey, Emily approached her supervisor about taking on a leadership role in upcoming projects. She found herself able to express her ideas clearly, advocate for herself, and seek collaboration. The previous fears of inadequacy faded, replaced by the understanding that she had valuable contributions to make in the workplace. Perhaps most importantly, Emily had discovered the art of optimism, an evolving belief that tomorrow could bring something beautiful, even if wrapped in uncertainty. She held tightly to the notion that life didn't have to be perfect, it simply had to be lived authentically. Each day, she took steps on her journey, grounded in gratitude for the lessons learned. As she admired the golden light of the setting sun spilling across the sky, Emily felt a vibrant mix of excitement and peace. She looked ahead, into the blooming future standing before her full of hope, purpose, and the promise of continued growth. Each moment was a chance to extend love to herself as much as to others. Emily had transformed her path from one of fear and self-doubt to one of compassion, insight, and an unwavering belief in the beauty of her journey.